Hello everyone, I'm Endymion for the Dork-at-Arms, etc. First of all, my apologies for not being a little more timely with my last couple of uploads, but I've hit a wall with new jobs. Anyway, today I just wanted to make a quick sort of response video, but also kind of a clarification, possibly, adding to the discussion with Matt Easton from Schola Gladiatoria did a video that released today about where the weapons of sport fencing come from. I don't have... Oh, actually, I do have my saber. Give me just 1 second. There we go. Now, I don't have an Italian epee like I want yet, but I'm working on it eventually. But I've been studying classical Italian foil and saber for roughly 2 or so years, a little over 2 years. And for those of you who are not familiar with the classical fencing tradition, it is basically sport fencing before it was electrified, and it is often based off of this text, which is The Science of Fencing by William Gogler. Gogler was a confirmed maestro di scherma, so a certified instructor and expert in all three classical weapons, the foil, epee, and saber. But in Matt Easton's video, he talks about the origins of these, and obviously the saber comes from straight infantry sabers. But when he talks about the epee and the foil, he says that they are both derived from small swords. And this is true. This is absolutely, unequivocally true. But I would add a small elaboration on the point of the foil, which is that given their standard classical lengths between an epee and a foil, as well as blade dimensions, it would be a little more precise, possibly, to say that the foil derives from small rapiers or late transitional rapiers, which were basically just slightly longer small swords that had edges. They were otherwise almost completely identical, and the epee is developed from a specific French first blood, as Matt Easton points out. But I say this as a student of classical fencing. I say this as someone who is starting to make a peruse through Gogler's other text, which is The History of Fencing. Specifically, he's talking a lot about mostly focusing on the rapier, and as the rapier evolved into the small sword, and the late rapier, the transitional rapier, or otherwise called the small rapier or the small sword rapier. I've also heard it called a court sword, which is a little interesting. But anyway, I just wanted to add that small elaboration that the epee was developed from a very specific variant out of the small swords, and that the foil is developed as a simulacrum for a small rapier or late transitional rapier. And it might be a little more obvious because of the Italian hilt on my particular piece. Let me put that up so there's color contrast. It might be slightly more obvious given the form of this hilt that does somewhat more keenly resemble a small sword or a late rapier. Similarly, a saber obviously derives from a saber. You can tell that by the hilt, the blade, etc. But I've also been told this by word of mouth, so take it with a grain of salt that it was word of mouth, as well as Gogler's other book, The History of Fencing, where he goes back to various archives and actually looked at, for instance, Palladini, before Palladini was translated or anything. And this was back in like the 70s and 80s. Now, it is also, taking it with a grain of salt, that I am speaking from the classical oral tradition with masters and with provosts who are in that tradition, who've been educated on how to teach those traditions on these particular weapon simulators. So take that for what you will, and take that whole elaboration for what it is, which is just one amateur giving a very small elaboration on otherwise a very comprehensive and very accurate presentation by Matt Easton. So, anyway, I'm Endymion for the Dork-at-Arms, etc., and I also thoroughly recommend The Science of Fencing, particularly for those who want to teach, do some classical. I'm biased, but obviously, yeah. I'm Endymion for the Dork-at-Arms, etc., and thank you. I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!